Hey, my name is Thomas and today let's shoot ISO 100 black and white film. So let's go. So as you might know, there's not a lot of different films available anymore, but there are still some good options, and maybe all of you analog shooters are using these films, one of these films. So I'm using either Ilford Delta 100, super fine-grained film from Ilford, or the Kodak T-Max 100. I also love the Fuji Acros 100. These three are the super fine-grained ISO 100 black and white films out there, but the Acros is sort of out of production. I think it has been out of production since 2019, now reintroduced, but only in Japan as far as I know, but maybe you can get old stock, of course. And then there's the more traditional black and white films, and as such I sometimes shoot the Agfa APX 100, and the main reason is you just go to a drugstore here in Germany and that's the only film they still sell there, and you can just have a roll for like 449 euros, so it's considerably cheaper than the other options. Yeah, I have been shooting here already a couple of days ago, a roll of Agfa APX 100. Today it's not exactly the same weather conditions, it was more sunny, but yeah, maybe we can compare them, because the difference in grain should be readily visible. Yeah, let's talk about hybrid process for a minute. That means, of course, you're shooting analog and then you have your film scanned. What I do personally, it's a very quick and dirty method. I just use a light table, set up my digital camera with a macro lens, and make sure there's no stray light coming in from the light table from around the negative, and then I just photograph my negatives and then I edit them like in Lightroom or any other RAW converter. You can do it this way. There's also professional things that you can attach to your camera where you can slide in your negatives in the front, so-called negative duplicators, stuff like that, or you just use a scanner or you have them scanned by someone else. Anyway, what you end up with is a file on your computer, and the thing is, the characteristics of your film, you have a lot of things that you can then add to it, you know, gradation, shadows and highlight. If it were color film, even more stuff you could edit. So the inherent characteristic of the film is maybe not that clear anymore. So in my personal opinion, if you shoot the Kodak T-Max or the Ilford Delta, it doesn't really matter. I don't see a lot of difference as long as you go hybrid. Fully analog, it might be very different, but again, I have to cover that in another video when I have some analog prints ready. The only big advantage between the Ilford Delta, the Kodak T-Max and the Fuji Acros is that the Acros doesn't have the reciprocity failure when you take long time exposures at night. With the Delta 100 I find at 45 seconds you have to shoot like 2 minutes already. Fuji Acros you just shoot 45 seconds, but if you're shooting in daylight I don't see a big difference between these three films. So they say black and white always use a color filter. I'm using a light gray filter, a light yellow filter that brings out a little bit of structure in the blue skies and takes away the haze from far away motifs. Let's compare without filter now. Maybe I have to compensate a little bit. I reckon you can use the yellow filter all the time, but let's just compare. At first glance, these two shots look very similar, but if you take a second look, then you do notice the added detail and brightness down in the brick wall and the second shot, which was taken with a yellow filter. And this is because the yellow filter just brings down all the light blue stuff that's often going on in the background and in the sky of a scene, and that is exactly why there is this advice: always put on a light yellow filter when you're shooting black and white. I need more yellow filters. Note, if you're shooting black and white, you need a yellow filter for every lens. Let's do a direct comparison. So I'm now shooting a couple of motifs with my Praktica loaded with the Agfa APX 100 and the Olympus loaded with the Kodak T-Max 100. Now that I'm back home, I have reviewed all my files. I scanned them. As I said, on the light table, I just take photos with my macro lens. That works pretty well for black and white films especially. And while I said that there is no real difference between the three super fine-grained films, the Delta 100 T-Max and the Fuji Acros, I have to say there is a little bit of difference nonetheless, especially in my opinion, the Kodak T-Max 100, it looks the finest grained of these three films. I don't think the difference is huge, and it's also sort of hard to determine, because when you scan your files, you end up with a raw file, and then you still have to in the computer you have to adjust the gradation, the depths and shadows and highlights and the contrast settings. And when you do that, you just have to do that to come up with a file that looks good on the screen and also good when you print it digitally. When you do all these adjustments, it can affect the graininess as well. I don't see that effect so much when you go fully analog, when you make analog prints in your darkroom. Then you can adjust also all this stuff you have to, but the difference in grain is not as obvious in my opinion. And so it's hard to determine the graininess of your film by just comparing digital scans, unless you took exactly the same motif at the same day with all the three films, which is what I didn't do yet. Anyway, I do think the T-Max is the finest grained film, but in terms of detail, it's not a huge difference. The other two, the Delta especially, looks a little bit more grainy than the T-Max, but still the fine detail is very equal actually. And the bigger difference is really between either of these three super fine grain films and then the traditional grain films. That's the difference that you really will notice. And traditional, I mean like Ilford FP4 or Agfa APX or anything like that. So, and also keep in mind that the biggest difference at all, the real jump in resolution, occurs when you go medium format, but that comes with a lot of other problems like size, and you have to be careful to not blur your shots and stuff like that. So My verdict. I like both of these fine-grained films, the Delta 100 as well as the T-Max 100. I use either one of these because they are readily available at my favorite stores here in Cologne, whereas the Fuji Acros is not on sale here. You can get it only over the internet. I do love that film, especially for its non-existing reciprocity failure for night photography, which is a really great feature if you do night photography. The more classic emulsions I personally don't use that much because I'm a fan of high resolution and fine grain. If you want even finer grain than either of the films that I was mentioning today, you really have to go either ADOX CMS20, which is the super high resolution film but a very special film with a lot of peculiar characteristics, stuff for another video, or you go medium format, of course. And also keep in mind that analog photography in 2021 is not anymore about the latest and greatest and the best detail and stuff like that. This race has moved on to digital. We analog guys know why we shoot analog, and it's not only about the super quality, it's more about the classic look as well, and either of these films can do it very well. I hope you found this enjoyable and interesting and useful. If you did so, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also hit the small bell button so you get a notification when I upload the next video. So I see you hopefully soon. Bye!